On December 29, 2017, two plumbers were dispatched to 19 McMillan Drive, which is essentially in the center of Oshawa's downtown, and this was where Adam Strong lived, sort of renting out the lower level of the property. In addition, the house also housed elderly tenants who lived upstairs. The plumbers were really contacted by the tenants who lived upstairs because there was a clog causing the pipes to back up excessively. Additionally, there was a foul stench that was really unpleasant. Horrible, in fact, because even the plumbers winced at the scent, and they used to do this kind of work. They were accustomed to handling obstructions, drainage problems, offensive toilet odors, and similar problems. The fragrance was so strong that even they were whining. Thus, plumbers going about their business. They are attempting to identify the source of the obstruction. They're working to clear the obstruction and resolve the issue. Additionally, Adam Strong, the renter from the basement who lives downstairs, is becoming extremely intrusive and acts as like he is observing their every action. While they're walking, he seems to be pacing around nervously and observing everything they do. Is I right? He's also bombarding them with inquiries. He's asking them what they believe the problem could be and how long they believe it will take to resolve. He's also just being extremely intrusive. A relative of the house's landlord claims that Adam had actually attempted to solve the issue on his own before and had failed miserably. Instead of delving into the specifics, I'll bet they uncover the blockage. It appears that he had even taken out the toilet to try and address this obstruction presently. They pull out about 40 inches of this strange pink flesh-like stringy stuff that has hair attached to it. They're taking pictures of it, emailing them to their boss, and seeking advice on what to do, so it's clear that they have some doubts about what it is. Additionally, they are placing this entire thing in a different bag on its own. Obviously, things get suspicious enough that someone gets so involved, I'm not sure if it's the boss or the plumbers, that they end up phoning the cops. When Kevin Park, a police officer, is called, the plumbers give him the bag containing this material that resembles flesh. It's also evident that he finds it somewhat strange, and he said it was a substance that resembled flesh. At this point, they're kind of bracing themselves for the worst, but holding out hope that perhaps this Adam Strong guy, for whatever reason, enjoys flushing me down the toilet or calling him back because it's a little strange. However, he enters and ceases questioning the tenants to determine whether it's merely a misunderstanding, like obviously mate down the toilet or something else. And when he descends to the lower level to confront Adam Strong, the tenant there, he simply responds, "Okay, gig's up, you got me at the body, and the remainder of the body is in my freezer if you want to find it. Apologies." In that very moment, allow me to briefly recap the case and provide some context. I'm going to present Rory Hashi, this girl, to you. August of 2017 saw her go. She was referred to as Hash Brown by her close friends and family, and they said she was a sweet, intelligent youngster with a typical childhood. She was a 13-year-old Army cadet. This was the regiment's Water Cadet of the Year. Yet as she grew older, she did experience some problems. Like other kids, she had some problems during her adolescence, and after being offered methamphetamine in high school, Rory started to go down a dark path. By 2017, her daughter had started to turn her life around and was back in school. Her mother had sort of lost control over her daughter and had even phoned the Children's Aid Society to report herself and in turn maybe save her daughter. She had a boyfriend named Tony and an APOM. Regretfully, however, fishermen in Oshawa Harbor found her remains on September 11, 2017. She was only 18. In addition to losing their daughter, Rory's family also disclosed that she might have been pregnant at the time of her death, so this was extremely upsetting for them. The devastation is beyond words, and my heart aches for her family and all those who knew Rory. After Adam's admission, the police returned to the residence and knew exactly where to search in the freezer, where they discovered a head and neck. Additionally, there was a tattoo on the neck that said "Alive," the same design Rory had in the same spot. They were also able to verify that the body did, in fact, belong to 18-year-old Rory Hatch through the use of forensic investigation. They did discover her DNA all around the place after doing more examination. Her blood was discovered all throughout the house, and her DNA was discovered on a mattress. It's clear that Adam Strong was 45 years old at the time. It was taken into custody. However, he hasn't, thus the only offense for which he is being charged is improper interference with a dead body. I had never heard of this guy before, correct? Nor is he a suspect in a homicide. They just kind of had to charge him with something so that they could hold him while they went and looked for more evidence to charge him with something else, and kind of got to the bottom of what was going on. He hasn't been linked to a murder victim yet, even though her body was discovered at his house. He even declares, "I want to spill the beans," as soon as they put him in the car to be taken to the police station, and he simply begins opening up to Officer Park about everything. It's clear that he is recording everything that Adam Strong is admitting to. The most absurd aspect of it all would be if he had never begun to flush a portion of Rory's body down the toilet. I'm at a loss for words. It's simply so offensive. You know, flushing portions of someone down the toilet is such a dehumanizing thing for someone to do. However, he would never have been apprehended if he hadn't done that, hadn't clogged the drains, and hadn't damaged the tenants upstairs. This is likely because he wasn't a suspect. This guy had no one's attention. Truly, nobody knew this guy's identity. Furthermore, he simply begins admitting to everything. Thus, the discovery was nearly entirely the result of pure chance and luck. He tells the police to be really careful with his jewelry because it took him a long time to obtain it, which kind of stuck out as odd. Now, when he comes to the police station, they remove all of his stuff from him. The strange thing about that was that the gold necklace he was wearing actually had 3 engagement rings in the shape of females on it. Police suspect that these might be trophies from his other victims, but this has never really been confirmed. After that, he takes them to be questioned, and the police ask him if Rory's body was in the freezer. Thus, the night of his detention is when this interrogation occurred. However, because his bail hearing is the next morning, cops aren't really permitted to question him anymore. He hasn't been very helpful, and they don't have a court order. He seems to have closed down and clammed up, and by now, he hasn't even come close to formally admitting to killing anyone. Apologies. He started appearing in court on January 10th, 2018, and at the time, this was somewhat of a major case in Oshawa. It became somewhat explosive. The idea that someone you might live next to for a year or 10 years and share a house with could be doing something so horrifying right under your nose, in my opinion, was also incredibly upsetting to a lot of people. Furthermore, those who knew Rory and those who were now keeping track of the case would be quite irritated that he hadn't been charged with anything more. As of right now, the only accusation against him is improper interference with a dead corpse. Around the time of his initial court appearance, the police also said that they had discovered other DNA in the residence, including the DNA of a different lady by the name of Candace Fitzpatrick. It was discovered in Adam's kitchen on a knife, and her blood was discovered in the freezer where Rory's body was discovered. Candace, a 19-year-old Oshawa resident, vanished from sight in March 2008. Her father had described her as an on-and-off street girl, and her body had never been located, so it was more than 9 years before Adam ended up on the police's radar. She was described in some reports as having battled a drug addiction, so I suppose you could say that she was fragile. Furthermore, it must have been true that Candace frequently left her house unnoticed for weeks at a period. Given her disappearance in 2008 was not officially reported until 2010, and to be truly honest, it's all quite heartbreaking. Thus, they now have 2 young ladies who were clearly murdered, and they seem to have DNA evidence linking Adam Strong and his apartment to these people. Police had to do a thorough search of Adam's filthy flat in order to find the DNA evidence of these 2 ladies, which wasn't an easy task. And it was found, even though it was dirty and disgusting. Everything was strewn about. It resembles an abandoned house. Additionally, he had a ton of sex toys, BDSM gear, and handcuffs and other items for restraint lying around. They also discovered knives and swords. However, there is one thing in particular that stands out when looking over this case. He had an autopsy table. At home, he had a whole autopsy table. That's the type of guy we're dealing with, and it just amazes me that despite his evident terrible behavior and repulsive nature, the cops have never previously noticed him. It's evident that this person has a suspicious appearance. Police then bring him in for questioning since, as of right now, he feels that they are still unable to charge him with murder and that their only accusation is improper interference with a dead body. Consequently, they bring him in for a 12-hour interrogation, and clearly, that is recorded just like questioning does. Thus, that is the source of the controversial video showing this interrogation, and it's later used throughout the course of 3 days in court, since it forms the foundation for a significant portion of the prosecution's case against him. Adam thus tries to utilize his knowledge of the body during the questioning to exert pressure on the authorities, essentially stating, "I'll give you all the information I have about the body if you make my life in prison good." And he told them, quote, "I don't care, I just want an allowance, web access. Nobody in my family is going to get me a TV." Adam instantly realized that they wouldn't be giving him any leeway and that this wouldn't work. They would not allow him to acquire any power. Still, they made an effort to placate him. Furthermore, I believe that the interrogator made a great effort to induce him to speak. They gave him a full-course lunch, in fact. They grabbed Wendy's for him. They got a cigarette for him. It's also quite odd to view the interrogation film because it doesn't feel like an interrogation. Rather than being questioned by a detective, Adam gives off the impression that he's merely hanging out with a good friend. He even gives the investigator a handshake at one point, acting as though, given the circumstances of his current predicament, he's very at ease with the man. I was unable to locate the complete 12-hour interview, but I don't think he ever acknowledged being angry with Candace or Rory at that time. He has a knack of making admissions without actually making them, and he consistently acts in this manner during both his court appearances and his interrogations. For example, in response to a question concerning the knife bearing Candace's DNA, he stated, quote, "That's the procrastination factor that all I had to do was boil the knife. Danny, after it's cooked, it doesn't work." He added, "I kill small animals. I have all the makings of a serial killer." In addition, he hesitates a great deal when asked questions concerning Rory and Candace. He's already acknowledged a great deal of the crime, but he won't go into specifics about certain aspects. He now acknowledges that he flushed bits of Rory's body down the toilet, and he describes the process in graphic detail. He conducted the interrogation in a very casual manner. Nonchalant, really, for someone who could spend a lot of time behind bars. And the reason for this is that, insofar as he didn't really have anything going for him, he was fine with going to prison. He really said to the investigator, "I have to go back to my cell." His life was simply wrong, you know? Financially, he was not doing well. He felt alone. Therefore, the idea of having a roof over his head and 3 meals a day wasn't all that horrible. And if he succeeded in getting a TV and internet access as well, perhaps by attempting to exert pressure on the cops as he attempted to do at the store, then okay, this man is me. Since he has no regrets, let me play you what he said to Rory's parents. It truly makes me sick to my stomach. I'm not sure whether this is proper, but please give my regards to her father and mother. I send my sympathies. He eventually entered a not guilty plea to 2 counts of first-degree murder after being prosecuted in this manner. After viewing the entire interrogation recording, Superior Court Justice Joseph DeLuca declared that the dead person on the film was admissible and expressed his satisfaction that Mr. Strong was the reason behind Rory's death in the bedroom. Because of the significant bruising on Rory's head and face, it was concluded that blunt force trauma was most likely the cause of her death. Adam's flat included a bent hammer, which led to suggestions that it was the murder weapon. Adam the Elder disputed this. Some suggested that Adam was simply getting rid of the body and that she had overdosed on drugs. Furthermore, it seems to me that this was an effort to dispel any suggestion that he was the cause of her passing. However, the judge would have none of it. And I agree. The crime prosecutor claimed that Adam was directly responsible for her death, which made it a first-degree murder charge in Canada. In order for a murder to be classified as a first-degree murder, it must be premeditated, involve a police officer or prison staff member, or occur while another crime like sexual assault, hijacking, terrorism, kidnapping, etc. is being committed. Adam is being charged with first-degree murder because it is alleged that a sexual assault took place during this incident. And this was due to a few factors. To begin with, he was living alone, correct? For example, even though he lived alone in the basement, he did have upstairs neighbors in the apartment. Semen residue was also discovered on Mary's body. She also had a BDSM device on, which suggests that she had engaged in some form of sexual activity before to her passing. Additionally, Adam had dissected her vagina, maybe as a way to hide the sexual assault. Adam Strong was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and held accountable for Rory Cash's death. In Candace's case, Adam was indeed determined to be guilty, for the slaughter of men, not for murder. And I believe the reason it was reduced from murder to manslaughter was because they were missing Candace's body, which meant they had no tangible proof to work with. Adam was given 2 separate sentences by Judge DeLuca, one for life imprisonment for killing Rory, and the other for 18 years for manslaughtering Candace. He remarked, quote, "To be blunt, it suggests the opposite conclusion that Mr. Strong would have twice needed a chest freezer to store the dismembered body parts of young women who met their deaths innocently as start infinitesimally small." Applause broke out in the courtroom when the penalty was announced. It's clear that everyone was relieved that this man was at last being held accountable. The judge described Adam as a dangerous predator, and many people, including Shannon, Roy's mother, speculated that he hunted these women, picking them out because he thought they were weak. Adam said throughout the trial that he was raped when he was 4 years old, and that despite his best efforts to repress the pain, it ultimately led to his aberrant beliefs. The court heard excerpts of this interview, and while I don't think this was used as part of his explanation, nor do I think it's an excuse, it was undoubtedly a talking point in the media. Furthermore, I believe that nothing you go through warrants the killing of 2 defenseless ladies. Additionally, the court stated that although Adam, quote, "demons got off to the clearest start conceivable, there was no realistic chance of him getting better." That claim, along with the case as a whole, I believe simply highlights the fact that some people in this world are just bad people, regardless of what anyone else has done. This man was simply wicked in his core. It's also absurd to consider that he might not have been caught for this if he hadn't plugged his upstairs neighbor's pipes and flushed flesh down the toilet. After all, it took him nearly 9 years to find Candace gone, and there was no evidence pointing to him as the culprit. Nobody was writing him off for it, and once more, nobody was considering him culpable for Rory's death until the clogged drains. Nobody had any suspicions about him. Regarding these 2 missing women, there were no solid leads. This seemed to be just another everyday person. Thus, it appears that the case was resolved, and that's all that happened. He was sentenced to prison for the proper handling of the murders of these 2 victims. However, he did tell a prison officer where Candace's remains were in February of current year 2022, and he escorted police to find them. I have no idea what went wrong in his head or why he chose to guide them to this revelation. Perhaps, he simply concluded he had nothing to lose following his imprisonment. To be honest, with a guy like this, all he really wanted was credit for the crime. It was only his brief 15 seconds of stardom in the end. After all, he was this lonely, unimportant guy that everyone knew. For whatever reason, I'm simply relieved he took action because, as Candace said, his family is now dealing with that type of tragedy. A small amount of resolution, I suppose you could say. In a murder, particularly when a loved one is involved, there is never truly closure. However, at least they got to say their goodbyes and lay her to rest. Actually, police were summoned back to Adam's flat in July of this year after Roy's body was found there prior to all of this. Additionally, a tip of suspicious apparel items led to their call. Since the authorities haven't released a lot of information because the investigation is still ongoing, I'm not quite sure what made the clothing items suspicious. However, I will undoubtedly make sure to provide updates on this issue as they become available. However, it does indicate to me that the authorities are still investigating this man and that there might possibly be further victims of Adam Strong out there. Not to mention, when he looked back at his jewelry, which had taken him a long time to acquire, it appeared to have 3 engagement rings on it. Are they from different victims? In the interim? That's all there is to it. That's all the details I know about this situation. However, I'll be sure to inform you guys as soon as I learn anything more on the odd apparel items that were discovered in his residence. I promise to keep a careful eye on this matter and to keep you folks updated if anything further occurs. Overall, I think this man is very repulsive, and I hope he spends the rest of his life rotting in prison. But I'm done with that. And because no one knew for a long time what had happened to these ladies, my heart truly goes out to Rory and Candace, their families, friends, and loved ones. Neither leads nor suspects were present. Before this person unintentionally plugged his upstairs neighbor's drains, there was no proof. And that's how, almost by accident, everything turned out.